So, the Brown versus Board of Education was in efforts to overturn the idea of separate but equal, which was from the Jim Crow laws, which separated African Americans and whites in public restrooms, public transportation, drinking fountains, and public schools, which were segregated. And later in this lawsuit, they recognized that the racial segregation in schools were unconstitutional and that segregation in schools kind of brought up the idea of inferiority and that black students felt inferior to white students. Then, the Civil Rights Act in 1964 prohibited discrimination, whether it was in public places, schools, or employment. Um, and this was an addition to the Brown versus Board of Education, which required schools to take action in ending segregation, whether it was busing, redistricting, or creating magnet schools. So I separated the double standards seen in schools into the preschool experience, K through 12, and then the college experience. So in preschools, the U.S. Department of Education's data revealed that Black students make up 18% of preschool enrollment, but they represented 48% of students that received one or more suspensions, while white students represent 43% of preschool enrollment, but 26% of preschool children received more than one school suspension. And to kind of summarize the data right there is that Black students make up less of the preschool enrollment than white students, yet they have a higher rate of getting more than one out of school suspension. And what was also found that in preschool, even in preschool, these students, specifically Black students and students of color, are not received the benefit of the doubt when they're engaged in questionable behavior compared to other students, and they had a higher rate of getting a timeout, getting a visit to the principal's office, or getting an out of school suspension. So moving on to the K through 12 experience, what I found was that Black students, or specifically Black boys, are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white boys, and Black girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls, as well as Black students are less likely to be recognized for gifted programs, such as in the infographic on the upper right, which showed that white students are 1.9 times more likely to be enrolled in gifted programs than Black students. And there's also the idea of the fourth grade failure syndrome, which is the idea of the bias in schools, such as cultural insensitivity or disproportionately harsh discipline or lower teacher expectations, that kind of increased and has led to the decrease in the motivation and the enthusiasm of especially Black students, especially boys, in schools. And kind of to focus more about this aspect, I kind of posed the question of, does one's race affect their math education? And indeed it does. So what was found was um, students of color, specifically African Americans, Hispanics, and Indigenous students have a consistent underperformance on standardized testing, specifically in math. And these students are expected to struggle, and because of that, teachers don't really tend to those students because they expect them to struggle. There's a lack of attention as well as a large achievement gap, which is shown. And when we kind of zoom in to other aspects, there's also the one strike and you're out policy, also known as the zero tolerance policy, in which typically the actions of students of colors are criminalized compared to white students, and intentionally the policy was meant to make schools safer, but in actuality,